We like to think that the era of colonialism is gone. The empires have retreated, the maps have been redrawn, and most nations today have their own flags. But there is a place where the empire never really left: our language. I'm Alina, and this is a new episode of the Motion Podcast, where we discuss geopolitical shifts and trends. Think about the terms you use every day to describe the world. When you say the Middle East or talk about Central Asia, do you ever ask yourself who decided those names? They were not picked by people living there. They were assigned from the outside, often by empires in London, Paris, or Moscow, looking at a map and asking, what is this region to us? Today, we're talking about the colonial unconscious, the way we keep using old imperial categories, why it matters, and how we can start changing the conversation. Let's look at the Middle East. It is so common that it sounds like a neutral geographical fact. But if you were living in Cairo or Tehran in 19th century, you didn't call your home the Middle East. During this period, the Orient, a term used to describe the eastern region of the colonized lands, was split into three distinct areas: the Near East, the Middle East, and the Far East. Thus, the term Middle East was coined as a political construct by the British strategists around 1902 to describe a buffer zone, protecting their interests in India. The Near East referred to then Ottoman Empire and the Balkans. The Far East included Asian countries along the Pacific Ocean. The Middle East referred to the lands in between these areas, including the Levant and the Arabian Peninsula. It defines the region not by what it is, but by its distance from Europe. It is a Eurocentric coordinate system. Similarly, the term Middle Asia comes from the Russian Empire. Even today, many prefer using it over Central Asia to describe countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. There, the legacy of Russian and Soviet control left a geopolitical backyard narrative. For generations, the region was framed as a place that needed civilizing from the center. These labels were not just descriptions, they were tools of power. By naming something, you exert control over it. You dictate how the rest of the world perceives it, as a periphery, as a frontier, or as a problem to be solved. The other example of colonial language is how we refer to the African region, simply calling it all Africa. We usually treat the whole continent as a single, homogeneous entity rather than a vast and incredibly diverse region made up of 54 distinct countries, thousands of languages and cultures. This oversimplification erases the unique political, economic, and social realities of individual nations, and often promotes negative narratives, such as poverty and conflicts. Some people might ask, so what? It is just a name. But here is the thing. Language is the software of our thoughts. Researchers call this the colonial unconscious. It is a tendency to internalize dominant frameworks without even realizing it. Because these terms are repeated in every textbook, news headlines, and algorithms. They feel like truth. When we use colonial shorthand, we unconsciously reinforce the idea that the former colonial centers are the reference point for the whole world. It creates a hierarchy, the center versus the periphery. It silences local perspectives and limits our ability to see these regions as sovereign, complex, and self-defined. So, how do we break the loop? It all starts with unlearning. Decolonial scholars suggest we move toward more specific, localized terminology. Instead of the broad imperial Middle East, many now use West Asia or North Africa or the combined Swana region. These terms are geographic, not strategic. They describe where the land actually sits, not how it relates to a distant empire. In Central Asia, there is a growing movement of decolonial disruption. activists and scholars are digging into indigenous histories, using local languages and rejecting the post-Soviet label. The goal isn't to be politically correct, but to be conscious. When we change vocabulary, we change our perspective. You stop viewing a region as a pawn in a game and start seeing it as a collection of vibrant and self-defined societies. Language is dynamic. It evolves because we evolve. Next time you see a news report or use a label for a foreign region, take a second. Ask yourself, who created this term? And whose perspective does it serve? The empire may be gone, but the maps in our minds are still up for debate. Let's start drawing new ones. Thanks for listening. If this made you rethink the labels you use, share this episode and keep asking questions. See you next time.